The overall exposure is controlled by the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO, flash to subject distance and flash power. And as you just saw in the previous lecture, the aperture controls the flash exposure. ISO does that as well, but I'll come to that in another video. So what does the shutter speed do? Well, the shutter speed controls the exposure for the ambient light. That is, the exposure for whatever the constant light is. It could be blue sky or shop lights in the background, a table lamp, whatever is constantly on, like the lights I'm using to light this video. So if those lights are going to be on for a long time, like the sky, which is on for quite a long time, the way you control the exposure is by using time. Remember, we control the flash with the quantity of light we're letting through. That's our aperture. The ambient light in the scene or in our studio is controlled by time, and time is controlled by shutter speed. Now, on most cameras we use nowadays, there's a maximum shutter speed that we can set when using our flash. You'll have to check in your manual just what the maximum speed is. It's usually somewhere between 1/60th of a second and 1/250th of a second. Now, if you exceed that speed, that is, if you set your shutter speed to say 500th of a second, what you'll see is a dark portion of the photo, typically a rectangular area across the whole bottom of the image. So, in a nutshell, you'll ruin the photo. This happens because of the way the shutter moves in relation to the flash at faster speeds. I'm not going into any more detail about this here, as I made a complete video about maximum flash sync speed with a terrific animation, even if I do say so myself. And that's in my Become a Better Photographer course, part 2. I've included that video here as a kind of supplementary lecture, so if you're interested in knowing more, then please watch that. So what happens when you use a shutter speed slower than our maximum sync speed? Well, the slower the shutter, the more ambient light that you let into the photo. Remember that the flash fires at incredibly fast speeds, like 2500th of a second or 3000th of a second. So it doesn't matter what shutter speed you use, the brightness of the light from the flash won't change. That's important to remember. The shutter speed does not affect the exposure of the flashlight. So if you take a photo using flash and the light from the flash is, say, too bright or too dark, there's absolutely no point in adjusting your shutter speed. I did a simple experiment. The side of my house is cream coloured, and I set up a flash on a stand and took a series of images firing the flash at the wall. And I also made sure that I included some of the sky. Here's the first shot taken at 2/50th of a second. You can clearly see the light from the flash on the wall and the sky is quite dark. So then I slowed the shutter speed to 125th of a second and took another shot. You can see that the sky is now a little brighter. Now another one at a 60th of a second. The sky is getting brighter. But look, the light on the wall from the flash isn't changing. Sure, the part of the wall that isn't lit by flash is getting a little brighter, but that's because it's lit by the ambient light. Now to a 30th of a second, a 15th of a second. The sky is getting quite bright now, but the flashlight still hasn't changed. An 1/8 of a second, and the light on the wall between the flash and ambient light is almost balancing out. And then finally, at a 1/4 of a second, the flash and the ambient light balance out. So how does all of that help when we start shooting? Well, in the indoor photo sessions, the only ambient light is going to be those from my video lights, plus maybe some overhead light, and possibly a small amount of light coming in from a small side window. In all of the indoor shoots that I'm going to be doing in here, I don't want any of those lights to interfere with my exposures. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep the shutter speed at my maximum sync speed, and on the camera I'll be using, that's 250th of a second. Check your manual to see what yours is. Once I set the shutter speed, I won't be changing it at all during the indoor sessions. So that's nice and simple. But for the output sessions, we need to think carefully about the shutter speed, because that's going to affect how much of the ambient light we get to see in the images. Just like in the wall and sky example I just showed. I'll be covering that in more detail when we come to do the outdoor photo sessions. So that's it on shutter speeds. Bye for now.